we are ready to start the LEC 2019 Summer Playoffs with Splyce versus Rogue. Let's hit the riff.
Thank you, Sjokz. Hello, fellow summoners. I'm Drakos, joined by the wonderful Frost, as we get ready for the first game in what I'm sure will be a compelling best-of-5 series. I cannot wait to see these two teams go toe-to-toe. But if you saw the prediction graphic on Twitter, you may have already ascertained that it does appear to be a bit of a Splyce-favored matchup. But that said, the fan vote still very much on the side of Rogue.
Yeah, the Rogue fans coming in pretty strong today, but that's the thing. It feels like the expectations are very different for these teams. A lot of people didn't expect Rogue to even be to this point, so it's about defying those expectations, seeing how strong they can be in playoffs, whereas for Splyce, you need to prove that you're worthy. This should be a very easy task to dispatch Rogue if you want a chance at competing with Fnatic and G2.
Right, because Splyce even chose to face off against Rogue in this game right here, so we can jump on into this. We already have some expectations for these two teams because every Splyce draft feels very, very similar. They have some clear goals of what they're trying to pick up when they go into draft. That's like a self-sufficient top laner for Vizicsacsi, a level 6 farming jungler, a bot lane you can play through and have these scaling options. All these boxes must be hit, and then they can play the Splyce style we know.
And then on the other side, Larssen usually has a very consistent mid laner. He's one of the most stable members for Rogue, while as I agree with what the desk was just saying, VandeR, you want these playmaking, engage opportunities, things like his Alistar, his Nautilus, or more importantly, the Rakan, if possible.
Interesting now as we see some bans come up on screen shortly. Keeping you guys updated as it appears there is a delay in updating these, the overlay on your screen. It is the GP as well as the Xayah banned away on the side of Rogue. GP, of course, something that Vizicsacsi took into Finn's Kled last time they played and did dominate him. And the Olaf, of course, on the opposite. Not surprising to see.
Yeah, I think the GP is really smart here. Vizicsacsi loves that pick, and it helps Splyce hit another one of those boxes, and that's long-range, non-committal engage. The Sejuani, another one of those picks that we have our eyes on even after some nerfs to try and fit into Xerxe's wheelhouse.
But it also makes Rogue's plan pretty clear here with the Shen ban. They are taking away blind pickable options for Chachi in the GP and the Shen, which means that I think they're going to try to give firepower to Finn. They're going to try to play through this guy on one of his signature picks like the Kled.
Notice we're not seeing any Yuumi bans after the nerfs on 9/16. Priority has gone down on that champion. I also think VandeR and Norskeren much prefer to play the melee all-in supports, the likes of the Nautilus, and that, of course, the Yuumi gets locked in right now as I say that,
yeah,
but it's not getting banned.
What do they prefer, Andrew?
I mean,
one more time.
I think they prefer the all-in melee supports, especially Norskeren.
But this seems really risky because you know that the potential of the Nautilus or even the Volibear are still there. We've seen how devastating those two champions can be to something like a Yuumi, maybe even the Poppy if Chachi wants to go back to one of his blind pickable tank options. I feel like there's more than a few champions that Splyce can rely on to disrupt that Yuumi and whatever plan Finn and Rogue have brewing with it.
And now immediately though, Splyce respond with the Akali pick. Incredible in the hands of Humanoid so far this season. See what he can do in the postseason now in the playoffs. And paired up with the Lucian, there's a lot of very powerful champions on the side of Splyce.
We were talking back and forth behind stage getting ready for this matchup. And Ender, you and I both agreed that we thought Akali was going to be the highest priority. I am very curious to see what this Yuumi pick means for Rogue when we know that Larssen and Humanoid both play Akali and they gave it away.
I think we now know what it means, ladies and gentlemen.
Lord.
It's time for a little bit of Garen Yuumi. That's right. If you can't beat him, join him. And that is the story for Rogue. Unable to take down Fnatic. So we'll borrow a little bit from their book of tricks. Now paired with a nerfed Corki as well. Important art. So nerfed Corki, nerfed Yuumi, unnerfed Garen. But this is an interesting composition.
He is the secret weapon, clearly.
So we've seen this Garen Yuumi bot lane before, and it looks real bad early levels. I think, you know, the likes of a Lucian on the other side, you play through this bottom lane, you must smash it early because we've seen what a Yuumi and a Garen can do in the mid game. He becomes almost unkillable with that cat attached to him, and the cat enables him to run you down and alleviate all the weaknesses of closing the gap as Garen.
And I think that also puts pressure on Xerxe. Now, he's already got Kobbe on the likes of Lucian, so there is firepower and the potential to really hard smash a bot lane down there, although it's still relatively difficult to kill a Garen. So Xerxe needs to play something in the jungle that gives him agency, that allows him to attack this lane if they really do want to put it down early.
Which is interesting because Xerxe is almost always on these level 6 junglers that he can scale into the mid to late game very strongly on. Maybe needs to go for something a little bit more proactive. He played the Elise a lot earlier on in the season. It's a strong pairing, especially along something like that Renekton. Could be a good choice for him, try and shut down Rogue early on.
And I'm gonna be honest, we've seen a ton of variety in Rogue's drafts. We were talking about that earlier today, but from Splyce, this feels like a big departure from what we've seen so far. We have a lot of strong, almost outside of the Akali early lane focused champions for them, not something we have associated with Vizicsacsi in a while. And now he's limiting the options that Finn will have to go up against him, taking the Aurelia, taking the Kled away, trying to secure that priority matchup for top side. Not something I'm used to seeing for Splyce.
Well, I think if Rogue were ever going to actually be on the other side of a victory and you asked what happened, how did Rogue actually take down Splyce, it's that Rogue got an early game composition that was able to abuse Splyce in lanes. Normally Splyce don't like to play aggressive in their lanes, don't usually pick up a lot of kills there outside of Humanoid in the mid lane, so this is a departure for Splyce, and why not in game 1 in a best of 5, try to see if you can attack Rogue in the early game and say, we're a better late game team anyway, let's bring the firepower early and just shut them down before this begins.
It seems like Splyce are trying something new, Rogue are trying something new. It's all about this game 1 experimentation to feel out your opponents, try to figure out what they're prioritizing, and if it doesn't work, you have games to fall back onto to try something new out. This Sylas very likely going to be in the jungle here for Xerxe, even after some nerfs to that clear, still a good option for him.
My only concern is that he doesn't have a lot of good ultimates to grab hold of. I think Corki's ultimate personally is my favorite out of this one, but you're not getting the same power of the Sylas if he was versus something like a Sejuani or a Jarvan. And I feel like something that Splyce's composition is missing is a lot of hard engage. If they ever do get anyone low, it's really hard for them to capitalize on that.
It's also just a very low-ranged comp in general, not just with the ability to start a fight off, but also in terms of your scrapping evolution. Very mobile comp, but they need to be able to close the gap onto you, and that's when they can really deal a lot of damage. The other thing you have to consider is consistent DPS to try and deal with a buffed up Garen later on in the game. You'd consider maybe a crit AD carry, a late game AD carry would be much more effective at dealing with him. Instead, the Lucian says we must win hard early.
And additionally, the Aatrox now paired through as well, a champion we expected to have higher priority, but with the midst of all of these crazy picks kind of slipped through the pick ban so far. All of the healing of an Aatrox paired with the Yuumi, two champions that when paired with the Yuumi are nigh unkillable. But finally, the Volibear lock-in coming through, taking something from the Book of Vitality. They did very well into this lane early game when it was Fnatic versus Vitality, the first time we saw the Yuumi Garen.
So taking a look at both these compositions for Splyce, I feel like they have a really strong 2-item composition right now. Mid-game should be really powerful for them. We already talked about the dominance that they can have in their lane phase. They have a lot of options like locking in that Volibear to deal with the Yuumi. It's just now, can they make good on this promise and really shut this cat down before the scaling and the unkillableness of Rogue takes over?
And can Splyce defy those expectations, the stigma behind this team? They must play through the late game. Can they change that here in game 1 of the playoffs and make a statement up against Rogue?
High stakes for both of these squads. Rogue to prove themselves time and time again, worthy in the eyes of the fans, but so many analysts skeptical of what they can accomplish on this stage. High-powered early jungler in the hands of Inspired. Time to prove the rumors wrong. Not just the Olaf one trick. Looking for a little bit more here. As Splyce on the opposite side, expected 3-0, need to prove they're dominant, have bigger aspirations than just being top 3, and it is all going to be defined here in this best of 5. And here we go, folks. Classic level 1 stare down. No crazy plays at this stage, although you can see Norskeren and Kobbe keeping their eyes out. And you talk about the early game, the importance of bot lane to win. Well, I can't imagine anyone's going to be dying at level 1, so why don't we shift focus just a little bit, as Lucian is forced to dash away there. That's a lot of respect paid. Looking at the jungle matchup, looking at the Sylas that was nerfed on 9/16 up against a champion like the Elise.
Yeah, I mean, this is a champion that lost some damage against monsters specifically, so it's not going to reduce your ability to duel enemy junglers, especially later on in the game when Sylas does become so strong. But first clear, going to be a little bit weaker. The Q does have damage reduction when used against monsters now, but this will be a very similar story to most of Xerxe's games, where it is playing for faster level 6. Expect him to stick around his topside camps and really farm those free XP, while Inspired has a lot more windows to make plays between levels 3 and 5.
So it feels like Splyce have really strong strong laners in the Akali, the Renekton, the Lucian, the Volley, whereas Rogue have a very strong ganking jungler with the Elise. So can she try to punish some of these very aggressive lane positions from Splyce members?
Because while we have seen very explosive early games from Inspired, as you heard on the desk, both these guys are a little bit slower, are a bit more controlled, more worried about kind of denying opportunities for the opponent. But denying the Sylas in the early game will not be enough. If you're Elise in this case, you do need to make sure that Garen and the Yuumi can get through their lane safely. You want to snowball some of these other lanes and make sure Vizicsacsi doesn't dominate Finn like he did the last time we saw these two go head-to-head.
And if you're looking at lanes where Inspired could maybe look for some kind of play early on in the match, very unlikely that you can get anything done bottom lane around that side of the map because, let's face it, Garen and Yuumi don't offer a whole lot in terms of gank setup. But if you wanted to look into the mid lane, if Humanoid was ever pushing out of position, you could make something happen. Top lane as well, with a strong early laner like Aatrox, dueling 2v2 topside should be favorable for them until Xerxe gets some items under his belt.
Just want to quickly highlight what our observer showed us right there. It's really important when you're in a range versus assassin matchup that you get to the wave and you're able to bounce it and get it off that tower, because as soon as the assassins get around level 3, level 4, that's when the trade back becomes a lot scarier. So if the assassins can hold the wave on this side of the lane, they get level 3, they get access to all of their abilities, suddenly they're in the ranged champion's face and they really start abusing them. So this is kind of the one window when you're against a Corki that you can try to punish it, because if a gank comes early on, then suddenly that guy blows his flash, he can't approach the wave.
Have to see if that's where the attention goes. What Larssen could do, you can see a little bit of a focus on trying to shove this one in, not pushing too fast here.
I think because he's against the Sylas and they also have a ward on the top of his river, you can see it right there on top of Larssen, that's why he's playing safely like this. He knows that I'm probably not going to get ganked by Xerxe. I'm free to get this bounce and get this level 3 and get out of this Akali's face when I want to.
Yeah, Xerxe's pathing has also now gone all the way down towards the bottom side of the map, skipping Krugs, which usually we see the Sylases go for, but he wants to be in this river at 3 minutes 15 seconds with that bot lane priority. If he were to run into someone like the Elise, could look for a fight, but more than likely, he walks into the enemy jungle, puts down a ward on the enemy Krugs, and then finds a reset for himself to get back on that top side of the map and continue power clearing for level 6.
All right, now, the only other time I've seen this exact bottom lane, the Garen and Yuumi were dead repeatedly in the first few minutes. This feels much slower, and if what you told me in Champs League is true, this is pretty much entirely Rogue favored if they're able to just sit in this lane and to chill. Like, what is the break point here where you're terrified of this Garen Yuumi?
I think you have to wait for multiple items here on the Garen, because there will reach a point, I think, where Garen is going to be really hard to actually take down, and where you can just use him to move Yuumi around and start killing people with that artillery. Now, Yuumi was nerfed on this patch, importantly, damage off of her Q, so this should not be as powerful as it was previously, but now Inspired just going to be around this bottom lane to help push out the wave, because if you can actually freeze the wave against a melee carry that wants to walk up and auto-attack to last hit, you can then set up for your jungler to come down and find an easy gank.
Yeah, it's really important to recognize that Inspired is playing weak side of his map right now and protecting his bot lane, and then also trying to give coverage to Larssen, who is still very far forward in this lane. Now what this does is it gives access for Xerxe to walk into Inspired's top side of his jungle. You can see he's now swept it out, and try to look for some counter jungling. Although as I say that, looks like the jungler's on a crash course.
They just run face first into each other. Ward will be placed, means Xerxe is going to get priority to walk away if he wants to, despite the nerfs still able to clear out that camp quite quickly. Does take the use of the smite, now backing away. Inspired, spot him, push him out of his jungle. We'll spot the ward. Just never want that awkward moment where you leave the ward unchecked. And honestly, the rest of the map, everything seems to be pretty slow, pretty steady, pretty controlled, but we are getting closer and closer to level 6s, and that, of course, is going to spell more action. And I do like the early bit itemization coming in from Vizicsacsi here on the top side.
And this is something we see a whole lot in this matchup in particular. Renekton up against the Aatrox, we go for the early Executioner's Calling. Of course, when Aatrox hits level 6, he gets so much bonus healing off of the ultimate. That was the buff he got when he lost the revive on that spell. But now with the pushing lane, Xerxe wants to be in this area and try to catch out Finn too far up in lane.
I think Finn has a sneaking suspicion about what's going to happen, but that ward very deep in the lane gives Splyce information that they're in that brush.
Oh, Norskeren. All right, has the passive. Will we find a walk away? Nothing going to happen there, but Finn now caught on the wrong side of the creep wave. Definitely not where he wants to be. He's going to be in trouble and immediately taken down. First blood for Splyce.
And it looks like that Splyce just played the patience game with Finn right there, maybe taking advantage of some of his inexperience. Like we talked about, they have that ward very deep down the lane, so they knew that the Aatrox didn't just back up and walk to his tower, that he was sitting in the brush waiting to see if he could farm.
And you think maybe there's some miscommunication going on between the jungler and top laner of Rogue, because earlier, just a minute before that, Inspired had pathed up towards towards the top side of his jungle. Xerxe was there, stole away some camps. Now bot lane.
Norskeren, not what he wanted. Immediate trade. Well played by Inspired. Sniffs the play out, is right where he needs to be.
So Inspired could have been top lane to defend Finn. Instead, he wants to play around this 2v2 bottom side. Get that early kill, give them some pressure in this 2 versus 2, which they've been slowly losing in CS, but as you expect, now some kills, they get to that point where Garen becomes a monster a little bit quicker.
Taking another look at this one, I have a feeling, no, it's going to be the top lane gank. So again, that ward deep down into the lane, they knew that Finn was there. Finn decides to try his luck. He's like, there's no way he's still sitting in this brush. Surprise, he was.
Oh. And it's brutal, because he wants to break the freeze there. He does not want to have that wave frozen. He wants to be able to teleport back to the lane safely, and obviously more chaos ensues on the bottom side.
Yeah, so that was just an easy lane gank there from Inspired. We do get back onto the map at play, though. I think Splyce are going to be looking to try and make some stuff happen. What are we looking for here? All right, Splyce, they have a TP advantage right now in the top lane for Sjokz, but he's getting chunked.
Getting big, and you can see the graphic at the bottom of your screen. Not quite as important as we thought it would be, as there's already another all-in. But this is the thing you need to keep your eyes on. Finn, of course, 6 games in the regular season. He's played 13 games total now. This is his 13th, and you can see when he's doing well, he's doing fine. He's a contributor to the team. But when he gets put in a hole, normally he falls so far down. This game, though, now that he's fighting back against Vizicsacsi, could be a different story.
Yeah, and Finn's finding a lot of his confidence here because he does have his jungler underneath him. Now, what was scary is that Finn was really trying to break that freeze, which he does get the wave to crash in, so he's going to feel a little bit better. But it pulled Inspired to actually walk towards this top side to give him some cover so he could jam that one in because he's playing without TP.
And speaking of lacking that teleport, Sjokz holds on to his, so something we need to keep our eyes on in the next few minutes while Splyce have this advantage are plays around that bottom lane. Now that Xerxe is level 6, you have more ability to make a move and try to get Kobbe ahead on this Lucian. He also went back to base, picked up some AD for himself, so I really want to see Splyce try to get a deep ward in that bottom lane and have Vizicsacsi and Xerxe team up and make a play down bot.
And this is something that we saw all the time in the Fnatic versus Splyce game, is that Sjokz will give up a lot of his priority in his own lane to give advantages to his team. Even when he is on something like a Gangplank that can play a side lane, Sjokz is constantly grouping up and kind of at the beck and call of Splyce.
And that's something that Splyce really need, because you remember the previous Garen game, they were always getting dove and zoned away from CS under tower. Right now, Woolite is just down 60 gold, or 60 minions, only 300 gold separating him from Kobbe, and the lane is constantly on Splyce's side of the map. They're not pressuring 2v2 in this lane, so they need to be able to bring in the rest of their teammates to find a flank.
And now I want to keep my eyes on the rest of the map, checking in on how the rest of the matchups are doing. Of course, Humanoid and Larssen both without TP in the mid lane. And I think overall, when I look at this draft, it's pretty good news for Rogue. Despite the Corki nerfs, still confident enough to play him. They found a strategy for bot lane. Inspired has found success on an early game jungler that is not the Olaf or the Sejuani. So all things considered, this patch, which might have looked bad with the Corki and Azir nerfs, is looking a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, Corki doing fine so far. One of the concerns with the base AD changes is going to be the scaling. Ooh. Larssen picking on it. He's not concerned about the scaling right now, but he lost a lot of base AD. Win rate went down 5% in high elo. Now Xerxe coming in from behind.
Ooh, good sidestep.
He's okay.
He has the
does
package.
Have the package. Question is, how much longer does he stay around? Good blast cone to get Larssen out of the pit there. Not Larssen, rather Inspired.
So something fun to bring up about Larssen, and you can watch this on any of his matchups. He never misses CS. This guy is like Easy Hoon of old. He is so good at CSing, and he's part of the reason why Rogue do stay even in gold or get slightly ahead because of his numbers. And you can see that right now. 105 at 10 minutes. He's close to perfect CS.
It's actually so frustrating watching his pro view too, because he just actually will never fall down when his laners, sometimes make mistakes. You say, yes, in a matchup like this, ranged versus melee, he does have the advantage. But this is something very consistent he's done throughout the entire season. And for a player that's been relatively quiet in terms of making those flashy plays, it's that solid consistency that has been the rock for Rogue all split long.
It's about celebrating what makes Larssen very unique comparatively to a lot of our other mid laners. It's not the flash, like you're saying, it's that consistency and that stability, and that he will always find you gold leads, especially in quiet games because his CSing is so strong.
Look at this. Things continue to get better and better for this Rogue bottom lane, getting through an early game that we expected to be very perilous, to be quite honest. But maybe Splyce have a response to their own. Xerxe setting up on the top side of the map. Can look to steal away the Aatrox ult if he wants to. A quick flash out from Tim, but that takes him out from the tower range, and that means he instantly dies.
So it is Chachi that is getting a lot of attention despite the fact that there's still a TP discrepancy. But while Splyce are putting all of their eggs up in the Renekton basket and paying off, it means that Norskeren and Kobbe are suffering in this bot lane as Inspired is making trip after trip after trip.
And I'm really not sure if this is worth it. If you can continue to deny Kobbe, that's the range damage deal. That's the consistent DPS from this Splyce squad. Yes, he's doing fine in terms of CS, but as more plates and kills and pressure goes into the control of Rogue, with a Cloud Drake on top of it, it's going to get much more frustrating for Splyce the later we get.
And the Cloud Drake was kind of the thing that I really agreed with. Like, maybe Splyce don't really want to play about bot side because that Dragon's not really worth it. But they tried to convert their top side power into this Rift Herald, and Rogue just immediately read the play. They have pressure bottom, they grab a couple of plates, they then walk it across the mid lane, and they themselves take the Rift Herald that Splyce started for him. It was a great play cross map from Rogue.
Honestly, just donated over. That has to feel bad from the side of Splyce. Thought that they were getting the better end of that play, but did not work out in their favor despite looking so good at the start here.
I mean, this is just a very nicely played dive from Splyce. You don't have much questions when it comes to this type of move, as, you know, so we have run ourselves into a pause. But coming off of that play was the more important part, because Splyce chose to reset multiple members while Xerxe tried to pick up the Herald solo, while Rogue just did this sweep from bottom lane up to the top side, as you mentioned, and were able to pick up both neutral objectives.
And right now, looking at this game, it feels to me like Rogue are the ones making the better plays. I mean, yes, Splyce have been successful on the top side, but when you pick the Lucian Volibear bottom lane, I just, once again, one game sample size before this game, I expected people to die, and literally nothing has happened there, and that's partly credit to Inspired, but it also doesn't look like Kobbe and Norskeren and Splyce as a team are ready and willing to play around that bottom side in the same capacity.
And I actually really like Rogue's strategy going against Splyce. It feels like in Splyce versus Fnatic, which was the game that everyone's going to go back to if they want to study Splyce, that Splyce were caught off guard when they're facing something that maybe they're not used to dealing with. Now, that said, Garen and Yuumi have been trolling around in European scrims for a while. So this isn't completely out of the woodwork, even though we've only seen this combination of it twice on the LEC stage. But it is a different animal to actually play against it. I'm wondering if that's what Rogue were trying to leverage. Let's make Splyce uncomfortable.
And it seems to have been working so far. The other important thing is that it does change the dynamic of how you have to build your team compositions. Remember, they have a Corki in the mid lane, very important when you don't have an actual marksman down bottom lane to make up for that somewhere else, and that in this case is going to be Larssen on his signature Corki.
Things are only going to continue to get harder now as the Black Cleaver has come out for Woolite. Of course, not too many items in the back pocket of VandeR. And some pretty substantial nerfs to Yuumi's damage on the Prowling projectile means it's going to be even longer to scale up than maybe originally intended. But once again, Inspired, the third man in this lane. I mean, we're literally just Dota 2 tri-laning right now. He is committed to spending these resources on the top side, but will be spotted out by Humanoid. And of course, Humanoid getting closer and closer to the Gunblade. Maybe that can be the difference maker to give him some kill pressure in the mid lane.
But there's also an opportunity about where Inspired wants to attack with this Rift Herald. Again, you talk about how he's basically three-manning with Rogue. He was caught out by a great ward from Splyce, so they know that he's here, so they should be able to absorb this pressure. But he can just plant this, and they can go for a plate gank.
There's also a ton of wards in the river, so any sort of play that either side tries to make is going to be extremely telegraphed. Should know Inspired is here, but one cocoon could just mean instant death if it's on Kobbe.
Oh, it goes right onto Norskeren. The passive's not going to be enough. Instantly deleted. Doesn't even need the Garen ultimate, but Vizicsacsi is here. He's going to spend Calling the Meek, but instantly exhausted as well, trying to dash out to safety. The Infernal Chain is locking him down, and Woolite, the execution, the sword from the sky, and Humanoid just goes right into the Meat Grinder. The stealth will save him from now, but he's in the midst of the entire team, trying to kill Inspired, just gets deleted. My God, Rogue are destroying Splyce in this exchange. They've got the Rift Herald too, and that's going to be a 4K gold lead in an instant.
And reminder that Splyce opted into that. They knew where Inspired was. They thought that they actually had the trap card with the deep ward and the teleport from Chachi, but they played their cards wrong, and it bit them in the ass.
Yeah, Norskeren instantly goes down there with Inspired making that play through a lane, so massive win for this squad. Notice Xerxe and Norskeren coming around on the flank after the turret goes down. They're going to try and pick up two.
Maybe a chance to turn 3K in favor of Rogue. Maybe Splyce can get something back. A stolen Garen ultimate. Can he turn it to tenacity? Coming through, trying to speed him up and out to safety. Woolite trying to get away. The Ignite goes down. Woolite will fall in the end. VandeR next on the list. The Cat running for its dear life. Cat versus Bear. The Cat is going to make it out.
is able to escape, but ultimately big win across the board there for Rogue. Notice double the amount of plates taken here on their side. Big gains to be had.
I mean, the game was frankly even in gold up until that moment, and Rogue are now kind of throwing all of the predictions out the window by saying, no, if you don't challenge us, if you make a mistake, we are good enough to punish you, and that's exactly what they've done to Splyce in this early game.
And I get more and more concerned for Splyce as Chachi going to be in a 3v1 under tower.
Maybe the TP now coming in. Can he make his way out? He does not have the ultimate. Instantly deleted, and someone else is just throwing right into the meat grinder. Kobbe is next. The shutdown is there. Trying desperately to kill Larssen. Humanoid's on the backside. Larssen caught in the midst of the enemies. Cannot walk into Kobbe without risking his life. Can he find the kill? No. Locked up. No. Larssen, are you mad, man? He actually gets it. Finn now caught there, but VandeR's going to back him up. The cat, the healing, the prowling projectile. Humanoid has to run, but Norskeren on the way in. The final chapter will disengage. Rogue and Splyce trading blows, but the Akali next on the list. Massive damage coming in from Finn.
Looks like it was going to be a disaster there for Splyce. Ends up being a 2-for-2 trade overall. Even once more here in this fight around the bottom lane, but the game is not being nearly as slow as we anticipated earlier on.
And frankly, Splyce have gotten very lucky with the rotation of double Cloud coming out of the Dragons, because that's now Rogue having complete control over the bottom side to get the first Dragon, and if they wanted to, rotate into the second Dragon. If these were things like Infernals and Mountains, this could spell much worse for Splyce here, but with some fast thinking and a very bold teleport from Kobbe, they are able to turn this one around.
Yeah, Kobbe able to outplay there for quite some time, get Larssen in a position where he's quite low, but Larssen still able to turn it around for that last second trade. The Hex Drinker Shield coming in super clutch for him in order to get that final auto attack off on the enemy carry.
And just the back end of this play, of course, a lot of disengages here, but you can see the damage start to ramp up. Humanoid caught out, and at the end of the day, Rogue honestly matching blow for blow and a very fast-paced game, which, if you're a Splyce fan, should be concerning, because we took a look into the stats with the helps of the wonderful LEC stat teams, and when the CKPN, that's combined kills per minute, regardless of size, is 0.7 or less, they're 5-0. That's Splyce City. That's where they want to be, the slower, more controlled early games. Now, when it gets hectic, you can see 7 wins, 6 losses, much closer overall. Good news for them coming into the series, hey, Rogue's a slow team. Bad news, playoff Rogue, not nearly as slow.
It means that if you run pick-based compositions or you have pick-based potential, that you can really catch Splyce off guard, because they are a slow-to-set-up team. Once they are set up, they almost always execute perfectly. But if you catch them when they're trying to do it, that's when Splyce start to fall apart.
And I think a big reason why a lot of people favored Splyce coming into this game is because Rogue are also one of our slower teams. They don't play proactive, they play reactive most of the time. It has been a very different story in this game, coming in with a very new strategy with Garen Yuumi in the bottom lane, and then also the way they've been playing to attack these side lanes repeatedly.
But let's look at the state of the map right now, because all of the outers for Splyce have fallen down, which means we're much more on an open map, and we are starting to get these big item purchase points here. Now, we said that Splyce's composition feels really good around 1 to 2 items, so they are actually going to be in their power spike, I guess? I hate that word. They are going to be in their power spike right about now, so Rogue do need to be a bit more careful about where they're attacking on this map, because Splyce will have some firepower to bite back.
I think the other things you have to consider is Splyce's comp probably does better in smaller skirmishes than they do big team fights, because they don't have a Corki in the backline pummeling damage from super far away. They have a lot of these champions that want to jump on you and blow you up quickly, whereas Rogue, I think, have more options. They have the stronger front line in order to soak up damage and go for a 5v5.
I also think, just like you said, the poke potential between a Yuumi and a Corki is really disgusting. So if Rogue ever gets stacked as a unit in a wave and then just start throwing down that poke damage repeatedly, it's just one cocoon before they're ready to jump on you.
Yeah, and how does Splyce ever clear a minion wave outside of using the culling? That's their only real anti-siege option here. So if a Baron were to come onto the table, this game would look real good for Rogue.
Oh, Rogue with Baron is really terrifying.
I mean, we've seen it. Like,
Garen just runs under your tower.
Honestly, this Garen Yuumi combo is so toxic and so oppressive, and Baron buff just makes it go from bad to worse. And the Yuumi, of course, already has the Unholy Grail, working on the Echo, but gotta hold that knock, because meanwhile in the mid lane, Norskeren praying for that passive to save it today, but once again, the Garen ult just too much, shuts him down. The exhaust now coming out though. Xerxe running for his life. Prowling projectile once again will slow. Finn running in on the backside, has the extra movement speed. Stealing the Elise form, trying to jump out to safety. Clever play from Xerxe, but it's not going to be enough. Finn is on the hunt for blood, and he'll take the spider down.
You can't run from Rogue here. There's Garen Yuumi chasing you down. There is no escape for your team. Rogue can be able to now use this minion wave, push that down through mid. Splyce still has 2 people sitting in side lanes. Rogue can get towers.
Yeah, and we talked about that Baron. That Baron is going to be spawning relatively soon in 51 seconds, and now with second tier mid down and Rogue having full access to this jungle. They have good tank resources. They're still going to burn the Baron relatively slow, and I'm not saying it's going to be a 20-minute Baron, but again, if Rogue get that with this type of composition, I think it's lights out for Splyce. That is absolute devastation.
I think all Rogue have to do is set up vision denial around this Baron, sit in a bush with a Garen
Elise
Yuumi.
cocoon.
Yeah, and then the second Norskeren runs up to you, as they've done 3 times so far this game, you instantly cocoon him, you instantly burst him down, you get a pick or two, and then you can quickly turn into a Baron and force Splyce to fight into you.
And while we look back at this replay, important to note that Rogue just playing with absolute confidence here. You know, we heard from players about nerves, confidence moving in as they move into more high-pressure games, but looking in complete control here. The Garen Yuumi clearly very well rehearsed, and at this point, just easy to chase down these kills.
I don't want to take anything away from Rogue because I do think that they're making very smart moves, but you also then have to look at the other side and start criticizing Splyce. That's now 3 times that Norskeren's been caught out, and frankly, getting caught out like that, that cannot happen in a best of in some of the most important matches of your season.
And remember, a best of against one of the most rookie teams we've ever seen in playoffs. 0-0-0. 58.
Yeah, VandeR's been around the block.
VandeR's the veteran. He's here to lead the team, and evidently he's doing a damn fine job, but these guys are rookies on the playoff stage, yet they are showing up. They are going toe-to-toe with a team like Splyce that was expected to potentially be the 3rd seed for Europe at Worlds.
Yeah, you can't forget that VandeR was in the summer finals last year in Madrid. Finn, as we've said before, 13th ever LEC game, not even just playoffs, now bot.
Now looking to pick a fight with Vizicsacsi. Remember, Spear of Sjokz is going to make Vizicsacsi a big threat, but it's not going to matter too much if he gets taken down here. Trying to get enough Fury, Kobbe meek, but Finn just takes him out. The TP on the way in. Norskeren has to go in and try to save Humanoid. Humanoid dashing through. Kobbe's there as well. Maybe they can turn this one. Larssen now running for his life. Humanoid gets taken down. The Finn, he's going off. He's on a rampage. The Garen now coming in, but Inspired's on the backside. Goodbye to Kobbe. Right into the meat grinder, and Rogue are tearing Splyce apart.
And Splyce, what are you doing? What are these clown car teleports where you think you can hide multiple members, but you just walk face first into CC?
And now Rogue immediately get to run straight over towards this Baron. Xerxe is alive. Xerxe does have the ability to try and find a steal, but it is against the full 5-man stack of Rogue. And there's not going to be much room for error now for Xerxe.
And this is the Baron you're talking about. This is the final nail in the coffin, as if that bottom lane fight was not enough. Maybe Xerxe can find his heroic moment, but there's Finn. Can just follow him, has the Umbral dash chase on the abscond of Duck. Xerxe gonna try to turn this one, stealing away the Aatrox ult. Vizicsacsi now coming in, they want to take out the top laner, then they want to set their sights on the Baron. Lower and lower, Finn, quick dash over the wall, buying as much time as he can, 3K and dropping. They're not gonna be able to get into the pit, they have to pick one or the other. Xerxe, desperate, knows he needs to make his way into the pit now. 15K, getting lower and lower, can he make
he blocked it!
Over. Woolite with the hero play to turn it, he denies entry into the pit, he takes Xerxe's life, and that's the Baron for Rogue.
The perfect flash from Woolite over the wall to stop Xerxe dead in his tracks. Rogue able to swat him down immediately after. And this is the Baron buff we said. We said, no way they get it right at 20 minutes. Well, Rogue have done just that. They have come in and made a statement here in game 1.
And again, a huge error from Splyce. They overcommit, and Rogue just closed the door on them. And now with this Baron, you're going to see how devastating this can be. You can send Yuumi and Garen now with Baron up creeps behind them. No one can stop them. Even if you send multiple members, they'll just run away from you.
And this was the time where Splyce were supposed to be in control. 1 to 2 items. They were supposed to have something going on, but it's too little too late. The Yuumi has a Luden's Echo. The Garen's got a dead man's plate. There is no escaping them.
You're in full damage control for Splyce. You're picking bushes. You're trying to find uneven fights. This is like hit and run tactics League of Legends.
Well, you have to fight right now because you can't withstand the siege. Here we go.
Here we go, trying to find a way in final chapter to try to disengage, but Norskeren, he's already dead. The rest of the team now fleeing. They've been knocked apart. The coordination is falling apart for Splyce. Rogue are simply tearing through them. It's Humanoid all on his lonesome, trying desperately to fight Finn. Inspired goes up, Humanoid goes down, and Vizicsacsi taking it on the side. Larssen finding the 1v1, and Woolite just running Xerxe down. A stolen Garen ult is not enough.
It just never ends. Rogue are unrelenting here. 23 minutes on the clock. This team is not going to stop until they put Splyce in the ground.
Like you said, live fast, die young. Splyce recognized that that was going to be the only opportunity that they would have to try to catch Rogue off guard. At this point, that's the nail in the coffin. I think Rogue have cleaned out game 1.
And at this point, I don't think anyone can doubt them anymore in this best of 5. And plenty of people predicting a clean, confident 3-0 from Splyce. Feeling mighty foolish after the last few fights. Rogue gonna grab 2 inhibitors, the third one, the last thing left in front of them. Splyce, when this Baron buff falls away, can maybe hope for a few more moments of game time. Maybe another death rush, a heroic individual play to turn this game around, but otherwise this is a Rogue win.
The only death bush Splyce are gonna have are their own.
Again, you're going to start to see Splyce's composition really struggle now that they've got 2 inhibs down. Again, they don't have a lot of innate wave clear on the comp outside of just the culling, since there's only one ranged champion. So they need to really pick their moments about when they exit their base and making sure that they get both the mid and the top lane, the bot lane pushed out.
There you go. That's a fast Garen Humanoid. He's locked up, but they can see the animation. Now Humanoid running for his life, gonna try to get something, but the rest of the team is here. It's a slaughter. They're getting run down. Splyce will not be able to make it out of this first game. Rogue take down Xerxe. Woolite on a rampage. The culling doesn't do any damage. Splyce absolutely getting ripped to pieces. Finn now godlike. Kobbe next on the list. They're gonna take him out. They'll give another one to Finn, and Vizicsacsi has to run for the hills.
Time after time, people do not believe in Rogue, but time after time, they prove they are right where they deserve. They get into playoffs, and now they take down Splyce in game 1.
And this is it, a dominant showing from Rogue in game 1. More than just a Garen Yuumi, they have absolutely dismantled Splyce for their first win.
Now here's the thing, still in a best of 5, so Rogue do need to have more repeated looks. But my question is a mental one. No one expected Splyce to get clapped that hard. So is Splyce ready for that? Are they able to bounce back from this? You should say yes, they're a very experienced team. They have a very strong management behind them. But time and time again with Splyce, it's confidence, it's belief, it is finding that motivation and that momentum. Is this going to be a turning point where you see Splyce start to tilt off the face of the earth and Rogue are just riding high?
Well, you say game 1 was a game of experimentation here. Splyce trying to play much more proactively through the early game. Rogue going for the Garen Yuumi. I think you have to remove that option. Splyce didn't seem like they had any way to deal with that pick. And then you hope banning something like that, getting a new draft, you can rewire your mental, but it's always going to be tough.
I want to go back to something Froskurinn said, though, because the Garen Yuumi is the easy thing to point at, but this felt like bigger issues. This was Rogue's fastest win this split. Huge monster performance from Rogue, but also Norskeren was not on the same page. Those engages were scattered, and something went wrong on the side of Splyce.
So Caedrel, I believe, said it on the analyst desk. He was talking about limited champion pools with certain members of Splyce. I'm going to go ahead and say I think Norskeren has a limited champion pool with Splyce. Not that he doesn't throw many champions out, but he doesn't play that many champions effectively. He's always hovering the Volibear, but I think his go-to champions are things like the Nautilus, and when he's not on his Nautilus or his Alistar, Norskeren can be punished. And I think when you have VandeR versus Norskeren, if Rogue want to try to run, again, these bottom lanes and really pick on him, that is an avenue of attack.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be wanting in this type of draft here for Splyce. I think you have to go back and try to make these changes. I fully agree. The Nautilus, the Alistar for Norskeren, these are the picks that work so well. It's bottom lane champions that Xerxe can look to play through, that can be so impactful in the later stages of the game. Quite frankly, that just wasn't it today.
And I look at it and I just wonder how much else is left for the team. This isn't a best of 1, right? It's a best of 5. They could have prepared multiple strategies for this team, but have to wonder if that was the one that they thought would win the day, that they would just smash Rogue. Has to be wondering. Let's see what the analyst desk has to say, though. For more on game 1, let's check in with Sjokz, Caedrel, and the Moose.
Thank you very much, I believe. Yeah, here we are. There we go. We were just as stunned watching that game, which is why we were a bit unresponsive, because we were trying to figure out what went wrong. And I think this is something I want to talk about later as well. Just as much as Rogue played well, Splyce seemed completely out of sorts. And I think that consensus was also here on the desk.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they locked in Lucian early into Yuumi so that they could have a strong bot side, but then they locked in the Garen, which I think Splyce kind of got surprised by. I think Garen Yuumi is really strong in lane. It scales super well, and then you could see in the team fights, it was pretty much unstoppable.
Yeah, if we look at the picks and bans, indeed, Finn said, we are going to try something in the first game and we'll see how it goes. It was a resounding success. But before you know how it's going to play out, Moose, what did you think of both drafts?
So for Splyce's draft, the one thing that surprised us initially was that they went for Renekton on 3. So they were going after Finn's champion pool, essentially. They're saying we can get away with 2 bans and we have 3 supports ready for the Garen Yuumi. The weird thing over there was that they then decided to ban earlier. They have Renekton, who's good against earlier. They have Akali, who's good against earlier. We were expecting an Aatrox ban there on 5, and then follow up with the support pick later. So that was a bit surprising on Splyce's, and I think they got punished for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think Aatrox is one of the strongest top laners in the game right now. You can see in LCK, this champ is a first pick champ. So if you're going to take away the Renekton and just ban out 2 tops, I don't see why Aatrox wasn't on your ban list. You know, if they do pick Irelia with Elise, this combo is not that strong. Sejuani was down, so they weren't going to pick Sejuani Irelia. So it really didn't make sense to me why they didn't go for the Aatrox ban.
And then we have the Garen Yuumi, and of course, on top of it's comfort picks because Yuumi was nerfed a little in her Q damage, and of course, Garen Yuumi is not something you want to play if you want to play a Kai'Sa, but it worked because they also had the Aatrox, and they also had everything else that worked for them. Talk to me about the synergy of the rogue comp.
Yeah, exactly. There's lots of synergy with the comp. I think you can think of the Yuumi as an enabler, right? And once you have the Aatrox, who was behind initially, when he gets ahead, when that Aatrox gets 2 items and he has a Yuumi on him, it's one of the strongest combos in the game in teamfights. Having a Garen Yuumi or an Aatrox Yuumi, you have so many options in teamfights. And I think Larssen played this game exceptionally. Like, Corki did get nerfed. He has a somewhat tough matchup after 6, but he played phenomenally. Like, he had 20 CS lead, and he was pressuring out top side when Inspired was playing bot side.
It just shows also how, when you look at kind of the change list when it comes to patch 9.16, it's very easy for us to say, oh yeah, Corki's nerfed, we're not going to see him. But we see that comfort can play such an important factor in the first game of a best of 5.
These are also the 2 teams that if you expect anyone to continue with Azir Corki, these are the 2 teams you expect the most to play those champions. And so it's nice to see that, like, Rogue is coming in prepared. They're playing comfort picks, but they also have new stuff for them, like Garen Yuumi. So they've clearly been prepping exactly for this matchup, like, and attacking Splyce in very specific ways.
So much to talk about in draft, and then let's get into the game. We said slow early game teams, they don't do that much. They're probably going to be relatively even, or Splyce is going to be a bit ahead. But no, it was very active. What do we think of the priorities of both teams, where Splyce was looking at Finn and Rogue was looking at the bottom lane to target?
So this surprised me a lot. So you're playing an Elise with an Aatrox, so you have a really strong top side 2v2, and you can see that in the bot side of the map, on Splyce's side, there's a pink ward. So that means that Inspired put bot vision for some reason, so that the Garen Yuumi could probably get the push. So he didn't really want to play top side. Xerxe got deep vision on his top side. They just literally mismatched each other. One got to kill top, one got to kill bot, which doesn't really make sense to me. If I was playing the Elise, I would want to play for top side, bring Corki into top, make sure Aatrox gets the lead. And I guess Garen Yuumi is just a scaling. But I mean, yeah, Xerxe got some kills top and they got some kills bot as well.
And we showed that clip, but it kept going. Like, even after this, they sacrificed a whole dive and a wave on Aatrox top for like a Cloud Dragon earlier, which gave Sylas that tempo to be able to make the play top. So it seemed really weird that they were leaving Aatrox on a complete island to try to snowball the Garen Yuumi and play for a dragon that's like not even that good initially.
Yeah.
And the only reason it looked weak for Splyce is because after they got those kills, the follow-up wasn't great, especially with the Herald.
So when we look at that window then, because that's interesting to me, because we always say that Splyce is a team that knows what to do in these situations. So surely they have then read that situation. How come they dropped the ball so hard in the window that comes after that?
And talking about dropping the ball, you have a ward, so you saw the Elise. You even saw a Targon stack go to the Elise in that bush. I think Splyce pinged out the Elise in that bush like 50 times, and then somehow they get caught and they start a team fight on Rogue's terms rather than on Splyce's terms. I think once you see that Elise in the bush, you could just drop a TP behind and you start the engage. Whereas they got surprised by a Cocoon when she walked over a ward, and then, yeah, things kind of went downhill from there for Splyce.
Yeah, it was uncharacteristic because Splyce is making these mistakes with full knowledge, first of all. Second, they're playing a comp that relies super heavy on 1-3-1, and we were discussing this earlier backstage, but playing Akali against Garen Yuumi seems extremely difficult in the first place. And then to fall behind early through mistakes that are completely avoidable, there's no reason that these mistakes should be made, was extremely weird for Splyce as well. So if they continue with this, at the least, fix the early game or switch them up so that they're not hard stuck on these 1-3-1 comps and they have more options at 4-5.
It's almost like, of course, I'm sure both teams did so much prep, but Splyce knows what they're good at and what their style is. And they've seen what we've seen in that they are better at playing Rogue style than Rogue is, right? So how much will this mess up their mental preparation going into this now that everything's been turned on its head?
I think Splyce has enough players that have been in playoffs that they should be able to bounce back from this. They know what they're good at. They were third place in LEC contesting for second because they know what they're good at. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was them going, okay, can we win with this, or is this a stylistic advantage against Rogue? Their comp was very similar to something that we would play against Splyce, and we were able to execute that because that's our style. So I can see them thinking Rogue is similar to us, therefore they'll be weak against 1-3-1 as well. I would hope that now they'd go back to playing more Splyce comforts.
Yeah, and I know it is, of course, enticing to talk about Splyce because we hadn't expected them to go down in this first game, but now Now let's turn it on the other side and look at Rogue and how well they played. Let's look at a couple of mid-game team fights. Now, when you look at Rogue, how they play, and statistically, in terms of how deterministic their goal difference at 15 is, they score extremely high, meaning if they have a lead at 15, they are going to keep pushing it and most likely win the game. And that then comes back to what we talked about before. How secure will they be? How much confidence will they have, Caedrel? It looks like a lot.
Well, I think the problem they've had this game, it felt like Norskeren was kind of getting caught out before every fight started. You saw the one in top and now the one in mid.
Not
it feels
a problem
like
for Rogue.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like Rogue gets the engages they want, and Splyce is sort of autopiloting into them. I think Splyce needs to sort of, wake up a bit, be more attentive on where the Elise is, where they want to start the fights, and be more proactive in a sense where they want to start the fights.
Yeah, completely agree. It's nice to see that Rogue is stepping up and these players aren't scared of pulling the trigger when needed, but Splyce is also making it very easy for them, especially in this game. It wasn't hard for Elise to find a lot of these picks on Volibear, for example. So I want to see Splyce step up more, and then I want to see Rogue keep that aggression up and keep punishing them for it.
Yeah, great point. Here we see Finn. He was talking to us in a pre-game interview as well. We have deemed him kind of the X factor. He can make big plays, and maybe Splyce thought he's too much of an X factor because they invested a lot of resources in the top lane. Splyce chose red side. What do you think they're going to go for in terms of bans?
Well, I think you have to drop a Yuumi ban now, or you have to try to drop a Garen ban, sorry. I'm not sure what they're going to drop for those bans, though, because they did ban out the Kiana, which I think is really important. I think you should drop the Sejuani. I think Sejuani is not that important in the meta right now. I think the Sejuani only works with like Irelia and Renekton, but you're playing things like Akali and Renekton already. So I think just dropping the Sejuani ban, swapping it out for a Garen or a Yuumi, and then adapting to that. But I think their first rotation of Akali is really good.
Another
I
priority.
completely agree. I think drop the third ban on one of the Garen or the Yuumi, and then see how Rogue adapts to that, because I think it'll be easy for Splyce as well to play against the picks that they've probably practiced against in scrims as well after that.
Well, we've been thrown a curveball here, and as has Splyce in their first ever playoffs, Rogue are off to a great start. We'll see if they can continue surprising after this.
Rogue looking to prove themselves time and time again. As Splyce on the opposite side, expected 3-0, need to prove they're dominant, and it is all going to be defined here in this best of 5. Oh, goes right on the Norskeren. The passive's not going to be enough. Instantly deleted. Doesn't even need the Garen ultimate. But Vizicsacsi is here. He's going to spin, calling the meek, but instantly exhausted as well. Trying to dash out to safety. The Infernal Chain's blocking him down. And Woolite, the execution, the sword from the sky. And Humanoid just goes right into the meat grinder. The stealth will save him from now, but he's in the midst of the entire team. Trying to kill Inspire. Just gets deleted. Now looking to pick a fight with Vizicsacsi. Remember, Spear of Sjokz is going to make Vizicsacsi a big threat, but it's not going to matter too much if he gets taken down here. Trying to get enough fury. Call the meek, but Finn just takes him out. The TP on the way in. Norskeren has to go in to try to save Humanoid. Humanoid dashing through. Kobbe's there as well. Maybe they can turn this one. Larssen now running for his life. Humanoid gets taken down though. Finn, he's going off. He's on a rampage. The Garen now coming in, but Inspires on the backside. Goodbye to Kobbe. Right into the meat grinder, and Rogue are tearing Splyce apart. This is it. A dominant showing from Rogue in game 1. More than just a Garen Yuumi. They have absolutely dismantled Splyce for their first win.
Hi, I'm Pringles. I'm Chips. Wait, are we doing this Mac versus PC thing? Guess so. Then I am the Mac of the chips.
Cool. Then I'm the PC.
Perfect for gaming. Easy to eat, no greasy hands. Wait, I'm into gaming too.
You mean like into the keyboard crumbled?
No.
Or into the TeamSpeak rustling?
No, I'm into that noob frag LOL thing.
Well then, GG, my friend.
What?
It's
No, we're doing the clap first.
Answering questions in Sneak. Hello, Pedro.
Oh, well, thank you very much. How are the children?
It's time for our question of the day. What would be your dream Medivedi intro?
What about fireworks?
But what about a choir?
Zipline?
Or a choir?
What about parachutes?
But a choir!